Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside. It's one of my happy times and places, which is what this podcast is called. I'm Toby Hadoke, and in it, I do an episode commentary on a Doctor Who instalment that's been nominated by a friend of mine. They've chosen their favourite thing about it. I have to guess what that favourite thing is.
Hello, my name's Stephen Hatcher. I'm the coordinator of the Hoover's Doctor Who group based in Derby, and for the last 11 years I've been the organiser of the Hooverville convention. Toby, what I've got for you is the Sea Devils.
Well, hello everybody. It's a very exciting time for Doctor Who as I record this. If you're a non-patron and you're listening, I'm not rubbing this in. I'm just apologising if my current affairs are slightly out of date when you are, because I'm recording this in the sort of fallout of the news of, I was going to say the new Doctor, but the new Doctor and the old Doctor and the new companion / Rose / it does baffle me slightly how, now history may prove me wrong on this, but how people who watch a television programme that is all about the infinite possibilities of time and space haven't considered that there might be two people in that universe with the same Christian name, which I think is slightly more likely than them recasting Billy Piper. But anyway, who knows? History may make a fool of me. But anyway, I'm also recording this with the strange knowledge that the prior episodes of this particular Happy Times and Places are out as I record this. So I know that the lovely patrons, have been enjoying watching the Sea Devils with me and with Steve Hatcher. So I better carry on watching it before they overtake me. But anyway, yes, so if I make reference to events going on this week and non-patrons in the future, I mean, for us, when I record this, Jodie Whittaker is still Doctor Who. I think the way things are going, that will not be the case. I mean, she'll always be Doctor Who, but not the current Doctor Who. I think that won't be the case by the time you hear this in non-patronsville, but I do know. I try and keep a sort of 6-month gap. So actually for you, this is almost in itself a sort of time capsule, which I don't know if it's ideal. I don't know if I should actually do this closer, but I took advice from a couple of people who said, no, make sure that, patrons have early access and 6 months is quite a good sort of gap. So, I mean, it's not like this is a news podcast. I mean, as I say, I'm alluding to a couple of pretty seismic things, and because there's stuff in the air and it's all exciting, and I don't know, I keep seeing leaked photos of David Tennant on the internet, and I feel like I'm 33 again. I got an little wave of nostalgia to those halcyon days, but this. The Sea Devils, well, I get a wave of nostalgia about the repeat of this, and of course the repeat of this was sooner after its original broadcast, pretty much, 73, 80, 90, so it was 19 years after its original broadcast, whereas we are now 1992, 2002, 2012, oh yeah, we're now nearly 30 years, oh my goodness, since the repeat of this, where I first saw it in sort of glorious, transmissible quality, whereas before I'd had it on sort of ropey bootleg. Anyway, we're going to watch episode 5 of The Sea Devils, where Joe Grant has just been part of one of the, I don't know, just one of the most memorable cliffhangers of Doctor Who, which is basically the camera zooming in on her face with her looking scared. Or not scared, or, unnerved by what she sees, or doesn't. So, what has happened to TV's Doctor Who Under the Sea? Let us find out. I'm watching on BritBox, whatever you're watching on. Oh, no. And so, of course, it's now gone blank. Right. No. So, it got bored of me talking, which means, and that's a machine. So, you humans have probably dived out ages ago. Anyway, we have 23 minutes remaining of Season 9, Episode 13, which is known to you and I, dear listener, as Episode 5 of The Sea Devils, which I'm really enjoying and I'm watching with Steve Hatcher, and indeed I like to think with you lot as well. So let's press select, play, whatever we want to in 3, 2, 1. It made a clicking noise. No. Yeah. Didn't I mean, I may as... What was that countdown for? Absolutely nothing. Oh, no, actually, it's not 23 minutes remaining. It's counting down from 24:40, so it's a longer episode. Anyway, this is Doctor Who and the Sea Devils. Now, somebody... Was it David Gillespie? I think it was. Pointed out that every time I tell Alexa to turn the volume down, I turn the volume down on what they're actually watching. So I'm sorry about that. I'd never considered that your Alexa would be listening to me. Of course, non-patrons, this won't be a problem because by the time you're listening, Alexa will be defunct ancient technology like Betamax or Papyrus, and you'll just be having to control the volume with the power of your mind. But anyway, I might... can you block your Alexa's ears? Because this is slightly loud. So block your Alexa's ears. Hang on. Alexa, volume 4. So I'm sorry about that. So here we are. We're back to the recap. We've got all these things. I like those big chunky jumpers that sailors wear. That's the sort of thing that, you know, you'd occasionally... I remember having a fisherman's jumper. I don't know why they were called fisherman's jumpers, but I liked it. And people said it suited me. I don't know where it is now. It probably wouldn't fit now. But there are all those sorts of... And you could get clothes from sort of... You probably still can. In the olden days, you could get clothes from army surplus stores. But, you know, dads and granddads and uncles and people sort of had, you know, for particular jobs or occasions, they'd have a, you know, an army jumper or a naval jumper or you know, work gear that had a sort of military echo about it. And I suppose that was an inheritance of people that had got their own stuff that they'd, you know, their parents, or in some cases them, you know, brought stuff back from active service and then used it to mooch about it, which seems a bit... Oh, crikey, that seems... You know, this is the jumper I wore when I was at sea. Anyway, I note I not really paid much attention to the doctors because they obviously they transport the Doctor in that funny submarine thing. Here is Walker, the awful politician. I love his interaction with Jane Blythe, where she heartily disapproves of him because he patronises her. I mean, this is pretty on the nose, isn't it? It's interesting how how politicians have changed since Masters in Doctor Who and the Silurians, where Geoffrey Palmer plays it straight and is quite a reasonable figure. We've had Chin in The Claws of Axos, who everyone hates. People don't like that performance at all. I've never really minded it. But he is cut from a different cloth from the sort of politicians we saw in season 7. And you know, this is Malcolm Hulke leaving us in no doubt as to what he thinks about these civil servants. Well, not civil servants, is he? He's not a civil servant. He's a politician. I like the Sea Devil voices. I can sort of do one. Alexa, volume 3. That's better. John Pertwee even looks good in a sort of anorak. He's great, isn't he? He is such an elegant man. And funny, when I was doing the sort of preamble to this, I like the way, I like the way that the Chief Sea Devil has an extra bit of netting. It's like, I get the necklace bit. I get the it's like a cloak. I get the string cloak. I mock, but it absolutely looks fine. It's just the logic of it. Okay, how do we denote who's the one in charge? Well, should we give him a bit more string? I mean, it really is. It's a cloak made out of string vests. Or no, it's nets, isn't it? But I wonder if, you know, if there's some sort of, whether it's whoever grabs the cloak gets to be chief, or when you get to be chief, somebody makes the cloak for you. We shouldn't worry about these things. Peter Forbes Robertson is the chief Sea Devil. He had been a guard in Power of the Daleks and one of the Time Lords, directed by Michael Bryant in the opening of Colony in Space. I don't know an awful lot about him. No longer with us, long dead, I think. But that's actually the mouth moves, which I have to note they hadn't really cracked that in Legend of the Sea Devils, had they? I think I was going to say post-production. It just looked more like somebody had sort of poked the film from behind, poked it digitally. That's nice. I like the Master's sort of entrance. It's not an entrance. He's sort of placed quite far back and the camera goes in on him. I like that. Now, I think this is this the scene where it kind of does a close-up on his mouth, eating his toast or something, which I think is a lovely... I remember Doctor Who magazine did an article called Nostalgia. It was when they were... I mentioned this before, and it had the lovely composite of all the Sea Devils rising from the sea. I like a toast rack too. I remember when bread was good for you. You should have bread for breakfast now. Terrible. Anyway, and they talked about Walker, and they talked about the close-up of his mouth, and I can't remember who wrote it. I think it was would it have been Gary Russell? No, or Patrick Mulkin even. I can't remember, so I'm not going to miscredit somebody, but I am just going to say I remember, and I am admiring of them describing this bit as the camera lingering on his gaping maw, and I'm sure I've used the word combo gaping maw on a couple of occasions, and it's because it's always stuck in my mind from that particular article. It's all going a bit doolally in Hadoke Towers. We've got a couple of dogs and a lift. And lots of noise. But I'm going to persevere unless you need me, babe. Do you need me? No? Bernard has a visitor. Bernard is my dog. Bernard has a visitor who's called Kobani, who is a dog with a pesky aspect and a prominent underbite. And Bernard, who is a very nice and friendly dog, is very discombobulated because this is his planet. He was here before Kobani, and now Kobani has come to stomp all over it, and I think he wants rid. So it's thematically, my poor dog's misery is thematically appropriate. It's funny because I remember when I watched this, at the time and discovered it as a television story, I hadn't really thought of it much as a story about the Master and the Doctor having a chat with, monsters. And of course, as a kid discovering this, had I known nothing about it, these would be the scenes that you'd love because lots of monsters. But I am, mindful of, that phrase. That has been used by better writers than I, that some scenes of Doctor Who can be squabbling rubber. But I like all this stuff they do with the Sea Devil's hand and the Doctor's head, and don't they touch hands later as well to sort of say perhaps it would be better to make peace. I think that was in the Resistance is Useless documentary as well, or it was a clip that was used as well. They seem to use a lot of clips from the Sea Devils in that documentary. Maybe it was because of the repeat season. But yeah, I like all that stuff. But obviously the hand thing is quite, that's quite a logical thing. But it's bred from the business with the hand to the back of the head, and I like all that. We get what that means, but it's slightly alien. So we understand what the drama's trying to say with it, but it's not derived from anything particularly specific within us. There's a lot of stock footage here. You can tell when it's... Well, I was going to say you could tell when it's stock because it's slightly bleached out, but I think some of those aerial shots were. But this isn't, because this is Norman Atkins, who I think... I mean, he was an actor. He's the Guardian in Colony in Space. I suspect he was probably slightly prouder of his role as the Admiral in the Sea Devils. Obviously another friend of Michael Bryant's, but I think he'd been... I think like a lot of Bryant's friends, he was a man of the sea. Now, Now, Martin Body, though, who plays Walker, is very interesting. He was a friend of Ian Hogg from Ghostlight. And I'm still sort of in touch with. See, that's slightly bleached out. I think that must be stock. But then again, that's not glorious. And I think some of this stuff is obviously stock. Yes, don't overthink it, Toby. If it looks like stock, it probably is stock. But obviously the stuff with Norman Atkins isn't. They didn't have footage of him just lying around. I love all this, though. Look at this. This looks $1 million. Especially for Doctor Who. This is all really broadening the canvas. However, Martin Body. Don't get distracted from the Martin Body. By these terrific explosions. I'm loving these sea explosions. Again, I think probably when I am getting distracted from Martin Body, but I'm aware the part of my head isn't, so hold that thought. But I love those sort of sea explosions, because as I say, I'm sure a lot of them are stock, if not all. But I think the Navy were cooperative, so they may have dropped. Are you allowed to just drop things every now and again? For Doctor Who's in town, blow up the bottom of the sea. But I think obviously the Navy have helped them out with a lot of this footage. But I think it's a sort of stuff that when I first watched it, I was just like, oh, it's probably stock footage, but it's actually integrated into the drama very well, and because there's so much unusual sea footage anyway, I think you kind of, if you're not somebody like us who looks for different quality in different film shots so one can decide whether it's stock footage or not, I think if you're just watching this, as I've said before, my mum can't tell the difference between film and VT, for goodness sake, so we took this is mostly watched by normal people. But I think all of this stuff, you're just getting used to Doctor Who being at a naval base and in the sea and all of this. And yeah, Norman Atkins looks like he's in the same place as all this stuff going on. And as I say, I'm not. They may well have. I don't know, but I'm not going to. You can look that up. It doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong. The point I'm making is. And that's actually a pretty good rockfall for Doctor Who. Sometimes those things are a bit pony, but that was a big old piece of ceiling that fell in. Oh, and it twitched in death. Oh, I like a twitch in death. That is what I say. That is verisimilitude. It's essentially a man in a rubber costume, but do a little bit of that. It just helps to sell the illusion a little bit. Little touch, a little something extra. But yeah, we've got used to seeing all the Doctor Who at the sea stuff, which is, what is unusual, the sort of main headline of what is unusual about this story. But then they start, you start seeing explosions in the sea, and you kind of buy that it's all there and it's all part of it. And this is not the usual stuff you get from Doctor Who. Now obviously that's and that's very good, because it's a good trick. I like the plotting of that. I remember as a kid thinking that the plotting of that was very clever. Yeah, send up a couple of corpses, and that will convince them that they've done their work. I mean, it's not great if you're. I mean, the inference was they didn't go and get a couple of dead ones and chuck them out the back door. They have sacrificed a couple of their soldiers. That I may be wrong on that. I've been talking all the way through it. But anyway, two Dead Sea Devils. That's a good image, and I remember thinking that a clever piece of plotting. And of course, I read something about it recently, actually. That we did this in World War II, didn't we? We dropped a corpse, an unknown soldier, into the sea with some documents, and the Germans picked it up and were fell for the ruse, which gave I think some disinformation about what was going to happen on the Normandy landings or something. So all of that sort of wartime daring do stuff was in the air when I was a kid. Those were the sort of stories that we read about and things. So that sort of plotting I enjoy. It's a great sort of simple trick that makes a kid go, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. So I mean, we shall attack their base. Oh, so that's really kicking up. So episode 5 of the Sea Devils is not one I really think about, because I always sort of think about bringing it up to Trenchard and the prison and that sort of storyline finishing last week. And then, of course, the big attack on the naval base, which is next week. And I never really think about episode 5 much. Oh, John Pertwee in a porthole. Oh, you love that. That's great. And I'm thoroughly enjoying this as much as one can when one chats through. Because, yes, I love the Walker stuff. I love that close-up of his gaping maw. But I love there's another Sea Devil corpse. It's great, sort of littered with corpses, which is quite sort of action-y, packed-y. And I'd forgotten, yes, he comes and rescues Donald Sumpter. We love a bit of Donald Sumpter. And David Griffin off of Heidi High. Keep an eye out. Keep an eye on Sumpter's eye. He's actually a handsome devil, isn't he? A beard suits him. Oh, and Rossa McPhillips, my military advisor, Toby Hadoke, would like to thank the Royal Rossa McPhillips for his assistance with the making of this program. Because I was saying I wasn't sure if officers were allowed, if were allowed beards. You're allowed a beard if you're on a submarine. Because you're underwater for ages and they sort of give you a pass. So that's what he said. I might, in the post-credits, actually read out exactly what he said, because I want to get it exactly right. But and I can't check that now because I'm watching Doctor Who, everybody. Look, I always notice Colin Bell has a blood blister under his middle finger here. He's obviously shut his finger in the door. But actually, this is such good quality. He's got stubble. The suggestion being they're under the water. So this is Colin Bell, who I have discovered is still alive. And this is Christopher Ray, who sadly isn't alive, but became a light salesman. And the other guy in the middle is Rex Rowland, who barely did anything else, and I think died in about 2004, I think. Because a lot of Rexes aren't actually called Rex, they're called Reginald, which makes things very tricky. That's Pertwee getting very cross with Donald Sumpter for killing the Sea Devil, but that's quite a bit of action if you're a kid. That's one of those scenes that you would just chuck out right now, the bit of the three characters, one of whom you've never seen before, playing cards and then distracting a Sea Devil. Oh, that Sea Devil wasn't dead. Oh, he'd just fallen over because the depth chargey bomb things. Oh, so that's quite good. So he was placed as a tip-off for the drama having later. I do love the way that the Sea Devils look on camera. As I say, they don't always walk brilliantly, but they've got these ones have good posture. And it's such a good design. So yeah, that scene between those three characters is an odd one, isn't it? But it's nice that we get Summers from before and what's Christopher Ray called Lovell. But yeah, Rex Rowland's character gets to pretend to hold his stomach, and then I don't think does much else in. He's sitting at the desk now, but he didn't do much else on telly, or certainly not in Doctor Who again. Anyway, I hope he had a nice life. He's got a bit of immortality that if you're painted with the Doctor Who brush. So there's that lovely propeller that caused so much consternation and got people from military intelligence or naval intelligence to come and interview Michael Bryant and Peter Day and say, "Are you spies?" Love that. This is very well shot, all of this stuff here. Having the slight bits of the submarine set before the camera and the placing of the actors, it's very nicely done. How's the Sumpter eye on here? Little blinking, but not twitching. Yeah, no, that's okay. And the negative effect on that shot as you see it through this. Oh, the camera works great. I forget how good Michael Bryant is with the master sort of slightly out of focus and below, and the profile of the Sea Devil. They really trust those masks, and quite right that they should. Obviously they're not blinking eyes, but that didn't really bother us as kids. Oh, sweat on his brow there, on David Griffin's brow. Go on, have a twitch. Oh, sweat on him now as well. This is all great stuff. Why do I never remember episode 5? And the music's working to augment this too. It is like sort of drops in the ocean, isn't it? Do 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 do. Yay, Colin Bell. We love Colin Bell, especially as he's still alive. And he will be back in Invasion of the Dinosaurs as a last-minute replacement, we think, for somebody else. Going home. I like that. And they're nice characters. I like the sort of the submarine sabbatical that we have. Now I think you'd probably try and find ways of bringing those, at least Donald Sumter's character in early and having him through to the end, having them on the... You'd probably have all those soldiers, all those naval officers, Marines, on the... That's a great shot of Delgado. In the final assault on the base. And, a couple of them would probably get killed. So that so that the bodies flying about in episode 6, you had a little anchor with. But of course, here that would be quite a big exercise because none of those actors are on film in this, so you'd have the expense of having to hire them in advance, pay them, have them on. I think there was some sort of retainer system in those days, or you certainly got paid more for being on film. So if you're on film and videotape. So anyway, let's not. But yeah, it was a much bigger consideration. It's an easier booking to have them just for the studio session that on the submarine. Walker is I love that because Pertwee is supposedly the establishment figure, but then you have to sort of, because he is a bit more established, certainly more establishment than Troughton or Baker, the more earthbound of the Doctors, for a period anyway. But Pertwee is great because he's got the authority. Peter Brace, stuntman Peter Brace. He only died a couple of years ago. You can see him. He gets some lines in The Prisoner, dubbed by somebody else in the Living in Harmony episode. He plays a character, doesn't he, Zeke? But he's about to not see any of these guys, isn't he? And then one's going to come up behind him. I always wonder where were you looking? Because that thing's standing right next to you. But that is glorious, isn't it? That is the Sea Devils rising from the sea. I actually think their body language is okay mostly. But now, of course, you'd want to dwell on that a bit more. You'd want 5 or 6 goes at that. But it's so good that they had the cameras on. So we've got all those brilliant photographs of it. They look fantastic around the base. I'm actually loving the design even more. I think they look terrific. I think I slightly got them in my mind's eye, sort of lolloping about apologetically. I think they look great round the base. I think they look great in contrast to the metallic surroundings. They look great coming out of the sea. Again, I'd have had that. I'm not a TV director. I'd have probably gone on. I'd have held on that for way too long. It's actually quite nice that you get if you look away, you missed it, and yet I'm so used to that imagery because we had so many photos of that, or that photo was used. Or whatever photos we had were used quite a lot, because there was also photos of the single one, wasn't there? Martin Body, who I still haven't talked about. Martin Body worked with Ian Hogg quite a lot, and I believe, here's a lovely fact. Because Ian told me this over when we were having a pizza after we'd interviewed Ian about his career. Here's a fact. Martin Body sang at the famous devil man, what do you call him? Aleister Crowley, the man of the devil, the black magic fellow. Martin Body sang at Aleister Crowley's funeral. There's a fact that you won't get in any other Doctor Who podcast. And we're about to come to the final cliffhanger, aren't we? And I meant to say, because Jo was at the beginning of this is a magnificent story for Jo, and I've barely talked about her, and I think it's partially because I take her for granted, but Jo rocks. So does Katie Manning. That's a great cliffhanger, actually. It's the worst cliffhanger in the thing, because it's just the monster points his gun at Doctor Who, but it's a great monster. It's a great cut, cut from the pan from the gun to the excellent design, but it's an excellent gun. It's an excellent face. And that, the forgotten episode of the Sea Devils, episode 5, the one I don't really think about hugely, is an absolutely wonderful thing. I love it. I'd have liked to have seen Martin Body credited slightly higher, but you can't have everything. He was an interesting fellow by all accounts. But I must actually email Ian Hogg and just get him to remind me of some of the interesting things about Martin Body that I've lost to the mists of time. Because that's the problem when you interview some of these people. You then go and have lunch, and they tell you loads of other stuff, and you're not recording, and that would be rude to. And sometimes the reason they tell you some things is because you're not recording. But he wasn't telling me. He wasn't imparting a secret. We just I can't remember how we got on. We just got on to Martin Body, and he told me a couple of other things. He told me a few other things, and I can't remember them. So I must get him to remind me. So look, what is my favourite thing about episode 5 of the... Oh, well, I jump straight to the close-up of Walker eating his toast. I think it's a great... Well, one very personal one, because I'm always reminded of that phrase, gaping maw. I think it was Patrick Welkin. I can check this. But gaping maw, very good, very good. But also it's the character of Walker who I think is fun. He is a bit arch. He's brilliant in the book. He has some sweets that he doesn't give to anybody. He's great in the book too. He doesn't go quite well. He does go far in this. He's pretty arch in this, but I think he's funnier than Chin. And you sort of, and he's more of a. I was going to use the terrible word then. He's more of a than Chin. Chin's just a sort of fool, whereas this guy is a. And Chin is dangerous, but this guy, he wears that puffed up. He's the arch Trenchard. He's the ascendant Trenchard in a way. At least Trenchard was a relic of an old time, and so you could kind of pity him for the fact that he represented something, an ideal that had failed and a past that he'd never get again. So there was something sort of bittersweet about his attempts to, there's something almost, heartwarming about his attempts to, maintain that thing that he felt was important, and at the end of the day, it was rather sad. Whereas Walker's a member of the government and is in power and will, use his, stupid, often selfish, pompous urges to do actual great harm and damage. Peter Brace I didn't get enough to talk about because, of course, I was talking about the Sea Devils coming from the sea. He's in the android invasion. They do a test android, and he runs down a corridor and gets shot to test how effective the android kill gun is. So anyway, my favourite bit of, and sorry about the interruption, but I thought I was sort of in a bit of a flow, and Shez has an instinct to know not to sort of come and go blah, 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 blah. So I managed to, but I don't like it sometimes when I listen to podcasts and they include all the sort of interruptions, but I have to because I'm sticking to time. So if she came in now, I'd stop, and you'd have a proper edit and everything. But I think we got away with it. In fact, I'll probably get away with it more if I don't draw attention to such things. Now I'll draw attention to the fact that I bet since Steve Hatchett is still here, downloaded onto my laptop. I thought I might have to retrieve him from the cloud. So my favourite thing. I keep interrupting myself when I'm talking about Martin Body. I'm having an out of body experience throughout this. The close up. Encapsulating Walker. Although I'm aware he's a bit broad, I still do enjoy it, and I enjoy what Malcolm Hulke's decided to do, especially as, in these six-parters, they can sometimes get a bit dry. And he's just the right side, I think, for me, of parody. And where he isn't, actually, where he goes over the top, I think they do good things with him. I like the close-up. I just think the close-up of the mouth chewing the toast, the gaping maw, the camera is telling part of the story about the character, and the character's actions are informing the story and are propelling the drama, and it just works on all sorts of different levels, and I think it's inventive, and I think it's a way of telling the story in in quite a bold way, but that I think on this occasion works because he is a grotesque, so you can afford a bit of a grotesque thing to do, and I admire its ambition to do that. I think it is quite arch, but it's contained and it makes sense, and I like it. And because there's nothing else quite like it in Doctor Who, I don't think, actually, where the camera sort of speaks to the character. I quite like the bit at the end of the rap in Greatest Show in the Galaxy when the ringmaster, having done his rap, looks and it picks on the sort of slightly pitted and carbuncled profile that Rico Ross has if you catch his face in a slight way, and I thought that was a really interesting, just a sudden, doing nothing but just the way that you film the actor's face. Anyway, so yeah, Walker's Gaping Maw is my favourite thing from episode 5, which was a very good episode of the Sea Devils, and one I often forget.
For episode 5, well, I've picked on something that is there all the way through the story. John Friedlander's Sea Devil costumes. Now, apparently Terence Sticks and Barry Letts didn't like the pale blue long string vests, but they are absolutely fantastic. And what a great decision to have the creatures wearing clothes. Unlike the original Silurians, who went round naked. They were clearly some sort of prehistoric lizard naturist cult. And every time we've seen them since, they've been properly dressed and covered their modesty effectively. The heads apparently were very expensive, and it really does show. The money's on the screen there. Those expressionless round turtle eyes in particular make them very creepy and otherworldly, and indeed threatening. The Sea Devil turns up later to do a bit of threatening in a random episode of Blake 7 for no apparent reason. They're streets ahead of the Silurians. In so many ways, they look that much better than the Silurians. One of the absolute classic monsters of the Pertwee era. And those blue string vests. Knee-length string vests. They chime very well with the blue of the sea, and the whole thing, and Pertwee's frilly shirts and all that. It just looks so stylish, and this story for me is just so very, very blue, in the best possible way. I love the look of those Sea Devils.
Now, that's interesting, because I think I chose the Sea Devil design for episode 1, but it was 2 Doctors ago. So, I'm pretty sure I can tot up the score at the end for anyone who really cares. I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure I chose the Sea Devil design, maybe for part 2, but earlier, which means that I actually get a point for that, and I got a point for Trenchard, didn't I? So I've got a couple of points. I'm sure I've chosen the Sea Devil design. I'm not going to win, I never do, but I'll take the small victories where I can. So thanks. Yes, it is a very blues, and actually I quite like. I was saying, because they don't blink, but I like how Steve has phrased that. Use those expressionless turtle eyes. And actually, now I think about it, do turtles? I've never seen a turtle blink. I mean, I've not had a conversation with a turtle. But why? Just because we blink? Because fish don't blink. So why would a Sea Devil blink? Actually, Toby, get over yourself. Why do we? I mean, although actually, that's just started on its own, so the house is haunted. So yeah, because the Sauvix blinks, doesn't he, in Warriors of the Deep? But he's got slightly eyebrowy thing, and so we go, it's better because it's it's an advance in technology. And I think they blinked in Legend of the Sea Devils, I think, as I say, as well as talking and breathing by somebody poking the screen, essentially. But actually, yeah, you don't want fish, those sort of dead fish eyes. I'm actually apologising for them doing something that they needn't actually do, because they are really effective, and I don't actually care that they don't blink. And as I say, Bryant is, very daring about as close as he wants to go with those, and so he doesn't mind. And if he doesn't mind, he's convinced me not to mind. And yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Steve, which has made me now less apologetic about a particular element of the story, which makes me very happy indeed. So, yes. And yes, they are dressed. And he said that, that the Silurians weren't dressed. Fair enough. I actually like the Silurian design of Doctor and the Silurians, but I take the point about them being naked, but there's nothing wrong with that. And I mean, are they? They're sort of naked in Warriors of the Deep. I know they've got shells, but they don't count as clothes, do they? I just think they're shelled Silurians. Unless are we saying that that's a sort of tank top? That's actually their clothes. Now, that's very interesting. I mean, to be fair, the Silurians in Warriors of the Deep can't even wear their own heads properly, let alone clothes. Can't be trusted with dungarees when their necks are flapping about. But that's another story, which I've actually already done. But if you were asking me to choose at this current time, I still think Silurians is a stronger story than Sea Devils. I've always seen the Sea Devils as the sort of poorer marine cousin. But this time, I have to say, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I think it's a belter. It's wonderful direction, wonderful monsters, good characters, looks fantastic. The Doctor and Joe are great. As I say, so much so, I've probably not given them their dues, really. And the Master too. I mean, he's just never not good. He's just great when he's just standing there. Good stuff. And that, I think, is the Droop episode, where there's a bit of sort of escape and capture. But I actually thought that was all nice and interesting. But it is always the episode I kind of forget, and I wonder why that is. As I say, because I think it bridges the gap between the Trenchard prison stuff and the finale, which is what we will be watching next time on Doctor Who, Happy Times and Places, with me, Toby Hadoke, and some facts and observations, and doubtless some mistakes. But that's all part of life's rich tapestry. Thank you for joining me under the sea, and I will speak to you next time. Goodbye. Thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. And my special guest this time around is Steve Hatcher. He can be found on Twitter at StephenPH_Hatcher. And do go to one of his conventions. They're marvellous. I'd like to thank Steve and, of course, the many patrons who make these podcasts possible. And they include Paula Reynolds, Peter Reed, Ian Radford, Liam Price, Mary Ann Plesherty. Mary Ann, if I'm pronouncing your surname right, please do inform me of the correct pronunciation and I will do it properly. John Pettigrew, Thomas Payne, Ken Patterson, Richard Patey, Phil Pascoe, Andy Parkinson, Russell Parker, Mark Trevor Owen, Jeremiah O'Connor, Tom Neenan, Andrew Nixon, Chris Murphy, Justin E. Monaghan, Phil Mitchell, James Miller, Nick Mellish, Steve Manfred, Glenn MacLeod, Philip Marsh, Darryl McLean, and Nate Lynch. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Would you like to hear your name read out like that or incorrectly? Please, if that's the case, go to patreon.com, Toby Hadoke, where for as little as £3 a month you can get bonus releases, early material. I mean, if you're listening to this as a non-patron, some of the patrons who listened to this when it first went out have probably died of old age. No, surely not. Let's not wish that on anybody. But it's you're about 6 months ahead on the Happy Times and Places. There are a couple of too much informations in the bag as well, and definitely they've had an extra sprinkling of indefinable magic. They also get any extra stuff I've got kicking around. 3 releases a week generally. You get as a patron, which works out to about 25p each if you're doing the £3 a month thing. And I'm not then including the pictures of my dog that I wang out on a Tuesday, which sadly are, for some of the patrons, the most popular part of my oeuvre. You get a 10% discount if you do a year in advance. But I know committing to a year or even a month is tricky in these times where, well, I've just looked at the price of a train ticket to London. That's been paid for by about 5 patrons. So, I know times are tough. But if you want to go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke, you can do a one-off donation anytime you're feeling flush or you think I've particularly deserved it. But you know what costs you nothing? Go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and give these 5 stars and a review. I'm a stand-up comic as well on twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. There's an archive of all the comedy shows I did for Excess Malarkey, my comedy club that I've been running for nearly 25 years. It's 25 years old in September. During the pandemic, we went online and had loads of special guests from all around the world, from James Acaster to Eddie Pepitone to Alice Fraser from Australia, Randy Feltface, all sorts of people. That's twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. Well, Trivia Fan, if I'm sounding perky, which I'm feeling not unperky, I'm recording these credits at, I was going to say early in the morning. It's actually lunchtime, just coming up to 1 p.m. But this morning I was up early and I did a 10-kilometre run. The run is quite generous, amble, flop, in preparation for the 10K I'm actually doing as I record this the following Sunday. So there's a 2-day gap. So that's my last one before doing the thing proper. And I actually feel okay. This is why people exercise, but it's not my natural game, and I'm sure I will soon fall into indolence. But this is proof that you can run 10 kilometres even when, carrying the produce of a small country around one's midriff and still make it out alive. If this is released as a tribute, a podcast by my surviving family, you'll know why. But I feel all right. I hope you're feeling all right. The sun is shining here in Manchester. I hope it is where you are. God, that's a unusually positive. God, it's this blooming exercise thing. It makes people happy. Why is it all the things that hurt are the ones that make us happy? That's an evolutionary. That's not that's not fair. You get rewarded with happiness if you punish yourself first. Oh, come on, evolution. Why don't you reward us with happiness for ice cream and indolence? That's what. Never mind losing our redundant nipples. Make us fueled by laziness and treats. That's what I want. Anyway, jolly. I might have to do this again sometime. Oh, I was going to go then, but bonus content. Rossa McPhillips, military expert, MBE no less, says generally the rule is clean-shaven. This is about beards in the military. This is the stuff you come for. The rule is clean-shaven for all 3 services, but Royal Navy submarine crews are allowed beards. They live in cramped conditions for 6 months, so it's a dispensation, really. UK special forces like the SAS or the SBS can have beards and long hair if they want because, well, they're special and can do what they like. Oh, I like the idea of that. Well, I've got a beard, so does that mean I could be in the SAS? I'm sure there's some sort of paperwork to fill in, but other than that, I should think I'm a shoo-in. I see me abseiling an embassy with my beard. I was very good at fencing at drama school. And Rossa also adds, and if you're in any of the services and your religion means you have to grow a beard, you have to write to your commanding officer seeking permission. And I've never heard of a CO denying this request. Well, there we go. That is everything you need to know about beards in the military and naval services. Goes to show what I know, because I don't know if naval counts as military. Yes, it must do. So the military is the land, air and sea, and the navy is the sea part. Anyway, there we go. Beards and fighting. That's the end. Inform, educate and entertain, Toby. I mean, it's like Lord Wreath lives again.